Kamalavare nakam adbhuta shingha dalita hiranyakashipu tanu bringam keshavadrita narahari rupa jayo jagadishare Jayo Jagadishare Jayo Jagadishare. Okay, welcome everybody. How are you all doing? Good to be back with you all. Some familiar faces here, and I'm sure more will be joining us as time goes on. This is our Q&A at the Rishikesh Kirtan Fest 26. We do it every night, except for last night. Last night was the only night we didn't do it because of the rain. Otherwise, we're here every night. Would someone like to begin this evening by asking a question? Yes. Remind me of your name, sir. Paul.
So I was thinking and wondering about, when you're talking about like the deer with the musk, okay? And it just runs and runs and runs, seeking and searching until it exhausts itself. And then it's like, oh, it was here all along. I had it. I was it. I am it. And how does that relate to seeking and being a seeker and practices and all the things we would do to get there? Is the whole point of seeking, like the deer, just to do it until you exhaust yourself and give up? And the seeking isn't you don't wake up because of the practices, you wake up because you're exhausted from the practices and then you just collapse into oneness?
Okay, this is a good question. Now, it's not seeking that is the deer's problem. It's not that it was seeking. And just to fill in the story so that people that may not be familiar, you're referring to, it's something that many yogis have been sharing for centuries, an analogy, that the musk deer has this unique, incredibly alluring aroma emanates from its own body, but not recognizing that that's where it's coming from. The deer smells that aroma and begins to search for it externally. And it searches and it searches and it collapses and not knowing that that aroma was inside it all along. And so the yogis say that this analogy is very appropriate for understanding our own struggles in this world, where we're also searching. We're also running through a forest. But what are we searching for? We're searching for happiness. There's no problem with the searching. The deer searching wasn't the problem. The problem was where the deer was searching. The deer had an assumption that this aroma lies outside. I will find it outside of myself. So if the deer would have searched within, then it could have found it. And so our problem is not searching. Our searching we should do. But the question is, where will we search? And if we think that, if we're convinced that I will find happiness through any external object or any external circumstance, then we will continue searching and never come to an end. We'll exhaust ourselves, we'll collapse, and still not find the happiness that we're looking for. And isn't that a story we commonly see? You know, that people, they get all the things that they hope. I think it was Jim Carrey, the famous comedian and actor, who said, I wish everyone could become famous and very wealthy so that they could understand that that's actually not where happiness lies. And so we assume that happiness is I just need to adjust a few things. I just need to get something more, and then I'll have it. This is a programming that is deep within the mind. The yogis hear, part of their searching is hearing these important texts. They hear about the nature of the self, right? That the nature of the self is quite the opposite of the material realm. The material energy is said to be asat, achit, nirananda. Okay, asat means it's not eternal, it's constantly changing. Achit means non-conscious, it has no awareness. And nir ananda means it has no inherent bliss in it. Now so if I can search forever into the realm of the asat, achit, and nirananda, and I will never find the happiness that I'm looking for. That real bliss. I'll find something that may be a reflection of it. I'll find something that may externally look a little bit like it. But I won't find it for real. Right? I might taste a little something and it comes and then it goes. Because that's the nature of this world. I've never tapped into. I've never experienced the real bliss of the self. So the deer looking is not a problem, but it didn't look within. And so we can search. Searching through external objects will never come to the end of that search. But if we can search within, then we can find it. But that's it's not just a question of becoming exhausted. It's a question of just awakening what's inside. It has to awaken. It's in you, but it has to be awakened. What is it? The most famous verse is it Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema? Sadhu Kanunai Shravanadi Surichite Karye Udaya. That Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema, that there's a love that is found in relation to God, in relation to Krishna. It's Nitya Siddha, it's our eternal perfection. It is what we are meant to be experiencing in eternality, in spiritual reality. But it just simply needs to be awakened. Shravanadi Shuddhichitte Karye Udai. Shravanadi. Shravana means, do you know Shravana? Shravana means, who knows? It's a practice of bhakti called hearing. It means hearing sacred texts like the Srimad Bhagavatam, like the Bhagavad Gītā. Hearing of Krishna's pastimes in these sacred texts. So Shravanam, there's a list of 9. Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, Padasevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakyam, Atmanavedam. It's a list of 9. But when it says Shravanadi, they're adding a suffix to the word Shravana. Adi means beginning with. So beginning with hearing is saying all these practices of bhakti, they can awaken that Krishna prema that's within us, that prema, that divine love. It can awaken our nature and we can experience it. So search, but we need to search in the right place. We need to search in the right place. And when that happens, it's not exactly that one just merges into oneness. There is a state of realization where one may feel like that. When one may feel like I realize my own eternality, like that, and it may feel like they've merged into a oneness. But there's still more. There's still another level to climb to get to the full nature of the self, and that's relational. That's love, because love always requires the object of love and the subject of love, the one who one loves, and then the love that one holds in one's own heart. You understand? So there's a oneness in love, but there's a individuality or a spiritual duality, in order for love to be experienced and shared. Is that all right? Okay, thank you. It's a very nice question to start with. I appreciate it. All right, everybody. Beautiful people. Wonderful to have you here. Would someone like to ask the next question for tonight? Yes, Prabhu.
Fifth canto, Vedic cosmology. So if we bring a concept like geography, our geography book, to reading that, are we getting a distorted picture? And how does that cosmology relate to degrees of subtleness and like from Sankhya?
Degrees of subtleness from Sankhya? I'm not sure what you mean by that.
Being more like a subtle energy rather than what we conceive of as matter?
Well, we understand that one name for the Supreme is Adhoksaja, right? That which is beyond the realm of our senses. So, in this world, we're given certain equipment, and this equipment is designed to perceive a certain type of energy. Just like, we'll have, you go into watch a film. What do they have, like those 3D movies, right? And if you go in there without the special glasses, you can't really see it. You put on the glasses, and then you can see it. And so similarly, it's said that these senses are quite limited, and they can't penetrate into this more subtle realm of energy, of the spiritual energy. Now, if we go through the Vedic texts, especially the Puranas, I understand, then especially the Puranas, then one can find a type of cosmology laid out there, at least in a relatively simple way, because again, this sometimes, well, actually, if you go back to the Vedas, it speaks of the material world as being 1/4 of all existence, right? But how can you take 1/4 of something that's unlimited? So right there we have a problem trying to understand the spiritual realm from our material perspective. But it said it gives us something to grab onto, something that we can apply the limited mind and senses to. But we hear that we hear this in, say, Brahma Samhita, which is also Vedic text, that there's a Devi Dham, the material realm, right, which is almost like a bubble within the broader spiritual sky. And then beyond that is the Brahma Jyoti, right, which is just like divine light. And then beyond that still is Vaikuntha, which is the spiritual realm, or the do they call it they say Devi Dham, they say Mahesh Dham, do they call it Haridham? Thank you. They call it Haridham. And so that's all laid out there. I'm forgetting the beginning of your question.
If we take our common sense notions of geography, like we're studying a geography textbook, and we apply that to Vedic cosmology, it seems like we come up with a skewed perspective.
Yeah, agreed. I believe we need to approach it in that way. That we need to be able to assume that our perspective is very limited. Sometimes people use the example like if we lived in a 2-dimensional world and someone spoke of the 3rd dimension, then we would be confused. If you said, meet me on the corner of 5th Avenue and 42nd Street, well, that gives me 2 coordinates. But I might, and if I was used to a 2-dimensional world, I might arrive at that spot and not see you. And you're like, well, I'm on the 11th floor of the building. Well, that's a 3rd dimension that's been added. And if I have no understanding of a 3rd dimension, then I'm kind of left lost. Even if someone tries to explain it, I might have a very hard time trying to conceive of it. And so it is, we would do well to assume that there's realms of existence and dimensions of existence that are beyond our experience, our limited experience in this realm. Srila Prabhupada would say certain things that would speak to that, involving not only space but also time. Right? What is the experience of eating a simply wonderful, a sweet in the spiritual realm? He was asked once. And he said, the experience is like you're eating it forever. Like you're tasting it forever. It's very hard for us to put that in the context, because when we taste something, we taste it and then the taste comes to an end. And if I'm tasting that forever, can I be doing anything else at the same time? Or am I stuck in one moment forever? And Prabhupada was once asked about the spiritual realm, and he said like this. He said, in the spiritual realm, nothing is static. And then he said, everything is ecstatic, right? So the idea that nothing is static, here there are kind of static boundaries which kind of limit us in certain ways. It's said that, I'm speaking from what we hear from our acharyas, like when they speak of even within the earthly realm, but the realm of Gokula Vrindavan, which is the spiritual world entering into the material world. It's said that, I believe it's Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur that makes this kind of commentary, that Vrindavan is like a lotus. It opens and closes, and it facilitates Krishna's leelas. How can Krishna be on one end of Vraj, and he's got no automobile or no bus or no taxi to take, and he can, be here in the morning and here in the afternoon, so far away? Well, they say this realm moves according to facilitate his leela. So it's not ordinary geography, but somehow it's a geography that responds to Yoga Maya. It responds to the needs of the Leela. If for the Leela to take place, Krishna needs to be here at this time, then the geography responds to it. We think of geography as static, but in that realm, geography is not static. Time's not static. Nothing is static. It responds to Leela. But no doubt. And I mean, we even hear about relative time within this universe and so on. So, but particularly when we're talking about the spiritual realm, it's responding to Leela, and it will be the most flexible.
Doesn't it seem that's the tendency, is to project? Doesn't it seem like that's to project? The tendency is for us to project our concept of space and time to the cosmology?
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of what small thinkers do, and we've been kind of trained in small thinking. Of course, Srila Prabhupada, he had his analogy for this one too, which was Dr. Frog. He said if a frog is living in a well, and it's born in the well, that's the only universe it knows. It's the only space that it knows. And if another frog from outside the well jumps into the well, that frog may say, where are you coming from? Well, I come from outside the well. Well, what's it like out there? Is it as big as this well? Oh, well, this well, it's definitely bigger than this well. What do you mean? Twice as big as this well? No, it's much bigger than this well. 3 times as big as this well? And I just can't accept what you're telling me. You can't accept it because you have a very limited realm of experience. But there's no rational, objective reason to not assume that it could be unlimitedly larger than this well.
Or that our idea of bigness necessarily translates to that realm.
Yeah, I mean, what to speak if you're speaking about different dimensions and so on. So we're trained to think small. If we're going to understand truth, we're going to have to try to think bigger. We're going to have to if we're going to be truly objective, we're going to have to be willing to entertain some far out stuff. Thank you. Yeah. All right, everybody. How's everyone doing? Anybody curious out there? Any questions out there? We're looking for more questions. Yes.
It's not really a question. I'm becoming 83 in few days. I am becoming.
Point it to you like that.
I am becoming 83 very soon. Too soon. 83. Yeah. And when I hear Vedas and Puranas also, I met a very great and wonderful Hindu master. He was not even a Hindu master, he was everything, and had wonderful lectures. And I went to so much people, but I'm feeling very simple. Just being here, enjoying, sometimes singing, sometimes looking, and if I to understand. And there's the inner joy, and in spite of uncertainty, how I can escape from India to Germany back. I was a German professor for a while, but it's gone. And who I am, very simple, like a child, enjoying to be a child and looking and nothing more.
Thank you very much. I'm glad that you found something for yourself here. Thank you. Okay. Looking around, all these wonderful people. Looking for the next question. Yes, in the back.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. This is my third year that I am coming to this Kirtan Fest, and my colleague introduced me to this science of spirituality. But what happens is, when I leave this fest and I go back to my office life or daily chores, I do not get a camaraderie wherein I can do Kirtan with, and it eventually goes back to where I started with. But I get this strong urge to come back to this Kirtan Fest every year, so but I'm doing it. But I'm not sure how do I practice this in my daily lives.
Where do you live, sir? In Delhi. Oh, there's so many nice devotees in Delhi. You just need to seek them out. You can find that camaraderie if you look for it, you know. It's a question, there's no obstacle in your path, sir. It's simply a question of if you would like to make this practice a priority in your life. Okay? You live in a city where there are dozens of even ISKCON temples, what to speak of other Krishna temples and other bhakti-related centers. You live, on any morning you can jump in a car and be in Sri Vrindavan Dham, in a matter of a few hours. And there you can meet also very advanced Vaishnavas and have very wonderful experiences with the right guidance. So all that's there. You're going to, if you want to be serious about this and make really make solid progression in the depth of your experience, in the depth of your realization and understanding, then you have to make it a priority. And that means you have to begin to sacrifice. You have to sacrifice time, you know, give some time every day for this. Then it'll grow. You might have to sacrifice certain relationships, you know, that aren't healthy. Well, not exactly fully the relationship, but how you spend your time with people. You might have to reconsider. Dietary considerations are also important too. If you're eating food that is cooked by people that don't have the purest minds, then it's going to make it more difficult for you, you know. So similar like this, there's many practices and many ways that you can sacrifice to try to advance your practice. I would begin by sacrificing some time and sacrificing one's own voice and one's own hearing to chant the holy names a certain number of times every day on the Japamala, Hare Krishna mantra. I would sacrifice some time in your week by trying to connect with a temple where maybe they have nice Sankirtan happening. You know, at least weekly that should be going on. It's not always easy, but eventually you could do that in your own home every day. I would look into the diet, and I would look into reading these texts and hearing them from advanced Vaishnavas. You could also go to YouTube and get lectures from very advanced Vaishnavas and hear from them. In this way, you have to put the time, the effort, the sacrifice in. If you do, the results will come. It'll come. Yeah. But don't worry. There's no obstacle. It's up to you. You can make it happen if you make it your priority in life. Thank you. Please do. Yeah, please do. All right. Next question, please. Yes.
It's actually not a question, but for the man that actually just asked the last one about how to continue this in his daily life, I wanted to tell you that there's also an excellent podcast that I heard from some of my friends called Wisdom of the Sages that you can tune into daily. And that one, I'm going to start listening to it myself. And a lot of my friends who are very devoted devotees tell me that that's a wealth of knowledge, that even if you can't physically make it anywhere, as long as you have an internet connection, Wisdom of the Sages is a great spot for you to continue your practice.
Got to learn to start plugging myself more. Thank you. That's right. Thank you. All right. Any other questions? It's a quiet night tonight. Oh, there we go. He's got a card. Yes. Please.
It's a bit more of a simplistic question. Bear with me here, Prabhu. But you mentioned a couple days ago in your 9 a.m. class that the Vedas are about materialistic goals here on Earth. But however, the Vedas are a massive text to try to tackle. I mean, I hate to ask for something as simplistic as like the Spark Notes version of that, but the Bhagavad Gītā already talks quite a bit about how we should view materialistic goals and the fatuousness of such goals. Do you mind expanding a little bit on how the Vedas speak in more detail about materialistic goals?
Sure. And I want to be clear. Yes, we're going to call it materialistic goals. At the same time, there's a sacredness to it, because it is a step forward for the majority of people in this world. In other words, if everybody in this world had the materialism of the Vedas, we'd have a much more beautiful and harmonious world, right? We'd have people, we would be getting along with each other far more, and we would be living harmoniously far more, and we would have a lot more peace, and we'd have, I mean, if you really accept the Vedic version, we would have good weather, and we would have plenty, there'd be no scarcity in the world anywhere, and so on. So the Bhagavad Gītā speaks this Vedic language in the 3rd chapter, where Krishna is using it kind of as an analogy to help Arjuna understand, welcome, that there's a system of sacrifice. There's a way things work in this world, and that is that on his behalf, different beings called the Devas are empowered to provide the things of this world. They provide them, and we receive them. And that we're meant to offer some sacrifice. We use this word sacrifice, and there may not be a great English equivalent, but I believe if we go down to the Latin from which the word sacrifice is derived, it has to do with making something sacred, sacrifice, making something sacred, right? So like, let's take my eating. I could just walk into a restaurant, order something, eat it, satisfy my tongue, satisfy my hunger, and my experience may go no further than that. But that's the Vedic literature saying, can't you understand that something going on here requires seeing this in a deeper way? That your evolution requires making this a sacred act. Recognizing that everything that you're eating here has been provided, right? Mother Earth, right? The rain, etc. The seeds and everything that's grown through the earth. You haven't created any of that. Somehow all that arrangement has been provided for you. To accept it and not offer some gratitude or some thanks means that you're practically a thief. And it means that you will have to, in the way that the world works, is it corrects that callousness that you have by bringing a little pinch into your world. Whereas if you would hear this message, recognize that this is coming from higher beings, express some gratitude through an act of sacrifice. For instance, with cooking, the idea is that you can still eat just as much, and just as nicely. But what if you took what the world offers you and you made it as an offering back to God? What if you said, look, God provided this rice, God provided this water, God provided this salt, God provided these vegetables, God provided this ghee. God provided all of these nice oils and nice spices. It's all it's wondrous how all of this is coming through. You know, you look at what do we need to get the vegetables that we eat? We need water, right? We need sunlight, right? Look at the water. There's a huge, vast supply of water that's held for us and preserved, called the ocean, right? More water than we can use. And it's preserved by the salt in the water. It keeps it from turning into big algae mess, all that salt, right? So perfect arrangement, right? You got the preservative right in it. But once it has the salt in it, it's no good for like putting on the crops. So it's going to need to be distilled. Well, this is also taking care of us. The sun shines down on the ocean and it distills that water. And not only that, but it lifts it up into the air, right? And preserves it in another form that can float in the air. Water is very heavy. But somehow so much water goes up in the form of in a gaseous type of form. And it's held in a cloud. Amazing. And even though it weighs so much, right? It rained very heavy last night, you know. How many gallons of water came down? Can't even measure. And 1 gallon of water is very heavy, you know. So much came down. It was floating in the air. And it floats in such a way where the wind can just move it away from the ocean and blow it over the land, right? So all these arrangements in nature are being made. Then that water, at the right time, it releases and it comes down to the earth. And it's absorbed into the earth. And as it's being absorbed into the earth, it's like it's passing through a filter. And as it passes through the filter of the earth, it's taking in all of the minerals of the earth and the aromas of the earth and the flavors of the earth. And it's collecting all that now in a more in a form that can move better in the form of water, right? The earth's essence is now inside that water. Distilled water, right? And then you have seeds in the ground, right? Different varieties of seeds sitting in the same ground. You have a bitter melon seed, and you have a watermelon seed, and you have a mango seed, and so many other types of seeds. Each one of those seeds is alive. It has a soul inside it, right? It's got its own computer code of DNA inside it as well. And they're all taking in the exact same water, but they're all manifesting that in different. They're all taking on a form that includes that water, but in very different ways, right? According to its special code, right? There's a bitter melon. It has a very bitter flavor, but a very powerful nutritional effect. Got a watermelon, right? The bitter melon, you take it, bitter. Watermelon, take it, sweet, right? And each one has its value to our body, right? And when you taste the bitter melon, as soon as you taste it, you begin to salivate, and you salivate within your saliva, reacting to the particular flavor. That enzymes are being released in your saliva that already begin to break down that unique variety of food that's in your mouth. So when that food, when you chew it, it mixes with that saliva and it's already beginning to digest. And then it goes down into your stomach and there's a fire of digestion in your stomach. There's heat in there that can begin to break it down and begin to spread that nutrition to your entire body. Right? And then when you eat the watermelon, you get a different type of flavor and a different type of experience and a different type of nourishment, etc. And the body processes all that. All of this is going on, and we're walking through the world so callous that we just scarf this stuff down and we don't even think about it. Right? So the Vedas are saying, think about it. All right, think about it. Think about how everything's being supplied. And wouldn't it be right if rather than just callously, crudely eating this, that you actually recognize that this came to me. Let me make an offering of this to God, right? So when I'm cooking, I'm thinking of God. And when I'm offering, I'm thinking of God. And in this way, there's no bad karma. There's no reaction. The world doesn't have to teach me a lesson because I've already learned it, right? To be grateful for what I'm being given. So in the Vedic in the Vedic scriptures, these are the texts for the priests to have an understanding of how this world works, to have an understanding of the devas and their positions. And if you read the Vedas themselves, one could, and certain schools of philosophy have interpreted them that all the different gods and goddesses, they're not supreme. They're playing roles. And what's supreme is the law. What's supreme is the karma itself. If we do the right sacrifice and we do it properly, then the gods and goddesses are bound to provide what we're due, like that. Okay, so if everyone in the world were thinking on that level, we would live in a much more beautiful world. At the same time, we're going to hear that there's much more. There's much higher levels to evolve towards, right? Because the fact is we could make a much nicer material world. And the Vedas are going to say that if you live this way, very consciously, in your next birth, you could actually take birth on a higher planet where you do have a more beautiful world, where you have a beautiful body that has a very long lifetime, where the food is much tastier, where sex is on a much higher level and much easier without all the problems that it is on this world, where the homes and the landscapes and everything is so pleasing. But then we're going to read in these texts, especially as we get to the higher texts. If you read the Vedas, it's going to make it sound like that's the place I want to go. But if you get to the higher texts, they're going to say, there's suffering there too. Brahma Bhuvana Loka, right? If you go up even to the highest planet, Brahmaloka, even that is a place of suffering, right? Where repeated birth and death take place. You know, they know that even though they live a very long life with great enjoyment, they know that the clock is ticking before their karma burns. It's just like a bank account. They can only stay there for so long and they come back down. Oh, and that's terrifying for them, you know. So there's something more. Don't try to find your satisfaction through external things. Now the Upanishads are going to speak on this level, right? The things that the Vedas are telling you, maybe that's a step up from really crude life, but there's something much more. Try to understand your own inner nature. Go within, understand your own eternality, your own consciousness, your own bliss. Experience that. And when you come in contact with that, the changing nature of this world is not going to affect you anymore. You'll be beyond it, right? So even if we're achieving material opulence through living a Vedic life, there's still something in the back of the awareness. There's still some hum in the back of our mind that this is going to come to an end. I'm going to lose what I have. And it creates an anxiety within us, right? Patanjali calls these the kleshas. One of the kleshas, one of the afflictions of the materialistic mind is I'm trying to hang on to life, right? I'm afraid. The one who's realized their own self, the first thing that you realize, if you really realize your own nature, is that I am eternal, right? Sat. That I am not this body that's destined to die. I am eternal. I'm beyond all this, and one can release that fear of that's playing in the back of the mind. So Upanishads are going to say, come up, feel your own nature, understand that you're beyond anything of this material realm, and relish that experience. But then there's still a higher level of understanding. We'll get into all of this tomorrow. We're going to really dig into it. But that is called bhakti, or divine love. Then it's going to say there's still more. You may have found peace. You may no longer be suffering within the material realm, but still even there's an emptiness. Because you're kind of aloof from the source of love that's there for you. Find that love. Not only can you find your own nature in your heart, you can find God in your own heart. And you can open yourself up to experiencing something that's far beyond just the peace and the release of material suffering. As a matter of fact, that's just kind of a neutral state. It's like material suffering, then the neutral state of material release. Buddhism would fall on that level. Yes. And then there's a whole nother realm of positive experience or positive bliss. Right? So like, for instance, if I ask you the question, what's the difference, what's the opposite of being $1 million in debt? What would your answer be? You see, that's one answer. But is that actually the opposite? Being free of all monetary concerns?
Maybe the opposite is to take it to the other side of zero, say $1 million above.
Exactly. Okay. So the non-dualists who interpret the Upanishads see the Upanishads as the most essential message. Their answer to what is the opposite of being $1 million in debt is to have no debt. Their understanding of the highest bliss is to be free of material suffering. Right? If the material world is a world of suffering, and the material world is a world of form and relationship, then the opposite of that to them is there's no form and there's no relationship and there's no material suffering. But the bhakti yogis who turn to books like Bhagavad Gītā and Srimad Bhagavatam, they say, no, that's the neutral state. The opposite of being $1 million in debt is to own $1 million. So the opposite of material suffering is not release from material suffering, but it's spiritual enjoyment, right? And within that, there's form, and there's individuality, and there's relationship. The non-dualist is saying, no, form and individuality are the cause of our suffering. And they're saying, no, they're not the cause of the suffering. Their warped expression is the cause of suffering. But in reality, that's not warped. They're the source of spiritual enjoyment. Does that make sense?
I mean, yes, but doesn't the suffering that comes from attachment to material come from the attachment itself? So if, we were in a higher plane where we could then enjoy those relationships on a spiritual level, how could we be free from the attachment that produces the suffering?
The problem, the fact is, it's not the attachment, it's what you're attached to. This goes right back to our very first question. It's a very similar question, right? It's actually the type of bhakti that you saw practice in Vrindavan, this Braja Bhakti. I once read a book, very helpful book. It was called, I believe it's called an Encyclopedia of Yoga. And I'm trying to remember the man's name. I want to say George Fernstein. And he compiled an encyclopedia of all these yogic terms. And it was quite vast. It was, an impressive work. It obviously required so much research. And I'm sure he knows far more than I know about most of the subjects in that book. But he commented on the type of bhakti that I practice. And I know that I know more about that than he does, because it's my specialty. And so he commented on one term, raga bhakti. Raga bhakti. Or the exact term was ragatmika bhakti. Ragatmika bhakti. So raga means attachment. Right? So ragatmika bhakti, he interpreted that term. The definition that he gave for that term was it's a lower level of bhakti where one is still maintaining some material desires, some material attachments. Okay. But I understand. I know. No. That's not what the Rupa Goswami and Sanatana Goswami and Jiva Goswami are speaking about when they say ragatmika bhakti. No. If you read their text, it'll become very clear. What they're saying is that there is a spiritual raga. Within any love, there is attachment. So that ragatmika is being contrasted with it is the superior, most evolved state of bhakti, being contrasted with the lower state of bhakti. In the lower state of bhakti, there's no attachment. One is practicing not being pulled by their attachment, but one's practicing because they know it's good for them. For instance, let me say I wake up in the morning to chant my japa, right? I'm not necessarily doing it because I love doing it. I'm doing it because I know it's good for me, right? So, but what if I came to the stage where I love to chant Krishna? I'm attached. I don't want to stop. That's ragatmika bhakti. right? Where the motive is stemming from one's spontaneous attachment. I love to chant Krishna's name, right? I love to hear Krishna's pastimes. It's not like, well, I better do it, otherwise I'm not going to grow. No. It's like, this is all that I want to do. So attachment creates harm and suffering when you're attached to the material, because the material is temporary and always changing. So what you're attached to changes, and then you lose it and you suffer. But in the spiritual realm, spiritual form is not subject to the law of time. And so now your attachment is working for you, right, rather than against you. So spiritual attachment is a whole nother realm. The non-dualists say attachment must be eliminated. The bhakti yogis are saying attachment needs to be purified. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, thank you. You understand things quickly. I see you. Yeah.
You explain things well.
Thank you. What a wonderful subject, huh? Yeah. Okay. It's you as you go deeper into your study of this, you're going to see that within Vedanta there are classically two schools. But most of Vedanta that we've heard about in the West is the Advaita Vedanta, the non-dual Vedanta. Most people that have spoken of Vedanta in the West have presented that aspect of it. And commonly people think when you say Vedanta, that's what it means. But if you come to India and you visit the holy places, if you go to Vrindavan, if you go to Sri Rangam, if you go to so many places, that are like the centers of learning of these different schools of Vedanta, you'll see that it's understood differently in India. It's very clearly understood that there are different perspectives. But I believe that now the idea of what I would call Bhakti Vedanta, the spiritual dualism in a sense, we could call it that, is it's becoming more popular and more accepted. Like seen more that way. The awareness of it is growing in the Western world. Okay, thank you, Joey. Do we have more questions? We have some more people. Another? Yeah, not at all.
Well, actually, you just spoke to how this is, how this is growing in the West, and Prabhupada had such a big influence on bringing this to the West, obviously, which is why the pictures are hung everywhere in ISKCON temples. Was it just the fact that he was it the translations of the Bhagavad Gītā and the other sacred texts that makes him so significant, or can you clarify his role in bringing this to the West? I know that he physically got onto the ship and came to New York and started to bring it to America specifically, but can you elaborate a little on his role in bringing this to the West?
Certainly, and let me preface it by saying that in asking me to answer that question, I'm answering it through the lens of one in his lineage. Okay, which means it's the lineage of Sri Chaitanya. Okay, yes. So Sri Chaitanya in our lineage is understood as Krishna himself. Okay, Krishna comes in so many different avatars, but in this yuga, he comes as the yuga avatar, Sri Chaitanya. He has an internal purpose. This is a side note, but it's hard for me to talk about Sri Chaitanya without mentioning this. But it's Krishna who is the ultimate object of prema, or divine love, recognizing that the experience of loving him is the deepest experience one can experience. And he wants to understand, what is that feeling like? What is it like to love God? So in order to experience that, he has to come as a devotee of God. And that's Sri Chaitanya. So his internal purpose is to understand the love that Radha feels in her heart. Is that clear? Okay. But he's also got an external purpose. And that is to offer that same kind of love to every living being. And the way that he does that is through the Sankirtan, is through the chanting of the holy names of Krishna. Mahamantras particularly. So beginning about 500 years ago, there's a generated out of this lineage is a lot of important literature that speaks about how this desire of Sri Chaitanya, desire of Krishna, will unfold historically. One statement that's there is that that Krishna's names will be sung in every town and village of the world. Now, if you say that even 100 years ago, it seems like, how is that ever going to be possible? What to speak of if you go back 500 years? Many people were seeing that as simply like like that's some kind of like poetic statement, but it's not meant to be taken literally. There's also, I was speaking about this some couple weeks ago. There's literature from that tradition wherein Nityananda, who is another expansion of Krishna, expansion of Balaram, who appeared with Sri Chaitanya, that he prophesizes that there will be a temple from the place where Sri Chaitanya was born, a magnificent temple, from which bhakti will spread through the entire world. The temple of the Vedic planetarium. So we can see that temple. It's not opened yet. But it's like, largely done, and within a short amount of time that will open, and it'll be a magnificent temple where Sri Chaitanya will be featured. But it'll also be like a whole educational. Imagine, like, right now temples in India are huge. I mean, they've always been huge. They've always had hundreds of thousands of visitors. Certain temples, like Tirupati and Madurai and Jagannath Puri and Nathdwar. There's many temples throughout India that get thousands and thousands of visitors. That enthusiasm has never waned in India to visit these important temples. As a matter of fact, it's probably bigger now than it's ever been, which is amazing. But this temple will become one of these huge, most important temples. But it'll be more. Imagine stepping into this temple. Will have practically the largest indoor dome. It may be second largest in the world or something. It's huge. You were there. No. But you've seen, yeah. And imagine going in there, and as you look up, you see. I don't even know what this technology is called, but it's almost like I want to say what do they call it? A hologram? It's almost something like that. It's like you can see a form like floating in the air that's showing all the different, some of the stuff that we've been talking about tonight, the different levels of the material realm, the spiritual realm that goes beyond them, the different levels of Vaikuntha, and then all the way up to the highest realm of Goloka Vrindavan where Radha and Krishna are situated. Imagine seeing that in this huge dome floating in the air. And then there's balconies going all the way up where you can have elaborate descriptions of these different layers of the universe. And that's just the main dome. Then you go into the other dome, and it's actually a super modern planetarium. That's where you're sitting back in these luxurious seats looking up into this dome and seeing a planetarium of Vedic cosmology, as well as all other kinds of really far out educational presentations of Bhagavad Gītā, of Srimad Bhagavatam, of cosmology, of philosophy. And thousands of people are coming through this every day. And then they're coming from all around the world. So the prophecy is that bhakti will spread all around the world from this temple at the birth of Sri Chaitanya's birthplace, and we're watching that happen now. But another prediction was there in that literature, that a Senapati Bhakta. Sena is a Sanskrit word. It means like the general. The Senapati. That there would be a Senapati Bhakta that would take these teachings all around the world. And we see that with Srila Prabhupada. Right? That he, against all odds, as a 70-year-old man, got on a boat with no money, a couple crates of his translations of Srimad Bhagavatams, and nothing else. And just was struggling alone. He was in New York City with no money. He managed to get a few weeks in the apartment of one Swami, and then he was living basically like in a little office building that wasn't even suitable for living in, just struggling, trying to present this knowledge to people, having a hard time. Then one person said, maybe you ought to come downtown, and I think the young people may be interested in your message. You know, up until that point, all the spiritualists that came to New York City were mostly in the uptown scenes. They called them uptown swamis, you know. The wealthier ladies had an interest in this kind of thing. And some kind of hip guy kind of said, maybe you ought to come downtown. And so he got put up living in a loft on the Bowery with one young artist. I don't know if you've ever been to the Bowery. If you go there now, it's largely cleaned up. But I remember from when I was a kid, it was the ultimate Skid Row. You can't imagine. I mean, you can't imagine just how rough a neighborhood that place was. And he's living there. You know, he's got no sponsor. He's got, you know, he's just has faith that he's meant to do this, serve this way. And he was chased out of that building when the person he was sharing the room with freaked out on LSD and started chasing him with a knife. Now he's a 70-year-old man on the Bowery in New York City with no money, nowhere to go, trying to fulfill an order of a spiritual master. That's where he started. And a few people caught on to his message in New York, then a few more in San Francisco, and then the next thing you know, the Beatles were into it. And then thousands of people are starting to get into it. In the last 12 years of his life, he traveled around the world. No, in the last 10 years of his life, he traveled around the world 12 times and initiated thousands of followers, translated volumes of books, opened up farms and schools and temples and created huge food distribution networks and did so much to help show the world what bhakti is. And it's miraculous. And now it continues to grow since he's passed away. So yeah, we're seeing it. Yes, in one sense, you mentioned his literature, and in one sense, you know, he translated all these books, and he inspired people to distribute thousands and millions of copies of them, and the books still go out. And in one sense, those books are his most important contribution. Sometimes we say, even if everything else collapsed, if these books are there, then bhakti will continue to spread. So his very clear understanding of these things, it cuts through a lot of the misunderstandings. And we see his Bhagavad Gītā change lives like no other translation ever did. So I have great faith in his words and his Shakti, his ability to spread this bhakti all around the world is it's a great wonder. Thank you. Yes.
I just wanted a little bit of context. So what was happening in India at the time with bhakti when he went over? Like, I all I know is about this Krishna consciousness, but I'm clueless as far as other lineages of bhakti.
Very good question. And bhakti has always been here. And as we were speaking of a little earlier, there are kind of two schools of Vedanta. There's the non-dual Vedanta, and then there's the Bhakti Vedanta. And the ideas of the both of them, there's something that kind of rose up maybe a century and a half ago, which some people call Neo-Vedanta, which kind of blended the ideas of both. But in my opinion, without really presenting the philosophical justification for doing so. So it kind of took the idea that everything is one, you are God, you just need to discover it, and blending it with a lot of the language and the beauty of the Bhakti tradition. Because the Advaita Vedanta tradition is commonly rather stark and cold. You know, it doesn't have all the beauty and all the talk of love and all the cultural beauty that the Bhakti tradition has. And so it was kind of became blended into what I feel is a somewhat incoherent presentation. But widespread. So bhakti has always been here. There's always been strongholds of bhakti in these different holy places. And there's always been people that are practicing bhakti. but the clarity of the understanding of it has been largely lost or watered down in many ways. So therefore, even these other lineages of bhakti, they appreciate what Prabhupada has done. I was mentioning that a few nights back that the Swami, who is the head of the Sri Sampradaya, the most long-established lineage of bhakti in South India, very traditional, when he was asked, Shankara, Ramanuja, Madhva, these huge names in the history of Vedanta, he was asked recently, the modern day representative of Ramanuja was asked, do you see in modern times, is there any acharya, any great teacher that will be recognized for thousands of years now as like they are recognized as these hugely influential figures? And he said, I can think of only one, and that's A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. So they can see what he did to spread bhakti and how influential and historic it was. So bhakti has always been here. And even in Sri Chaitanya's lineage, it was largely lost. Imagine, if you want to look at it historically, you think of, here's a bhakti lineage that's born, in a sense, in a time of Muslim rule, which means it's dangerous to be too influential, right? And therefore, a lot of people that are practicing it are practicing in very quiet ways. And it's also, at the same time, it's a type of bhakti that it talks about something very esoteric and even erotic. And so people are prone to misunderstand that or misrepresent that, or even take advantage of that, taking the most secret thing and really sacred thing and really degrading it. So over the centuries, due to both of these factors, the reputation of this lineage was in question. And a few people preceding Srila Prabhupada did a lot to restore that. One was named Bhaktivinoda Thakur, an absolutely brilliant thinker, writer, sage, real Renaissance man in the Bhakti movement. His son, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and then Srila Prabhupada, who was a disciple of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So a lot was done to clarify things and reestablish things in India, but then Srila Prabhupada brought it to the West. And he also mentioned that it was his intention that when he could bring Western people back to India and show that they've caught on to this, that the Indian people would begin to catch on to it more again. And that's also something that we're seeing happening now. Thank you. Yes?
Sorry, I missed a bit, but you did mention a bit of Advaita Vedanta and Bhakti path or Bhakti Vedanta. So is it like when these two paths meet, then there is a realization of God in a way? Or is it just one path one must take?
The two paths have irreconcilable differences, right? If we're going to look at them honestly and objectively, they've been debating each other for a long time, right? So in one sense, both sides respect each other. But each side one side is saying, yes, you've taken a nice step and take one step higher, right? The Advaita Vedantists are saying, bhakti is a good thing. It's a good step up, but to understand the full truth of the absolute, you have to let go of all ideas of form, all ideas of worship, all ideas of duality, and understand that there's only one, right? And the Bhakti Vedantins say, your realization of Brahman is a very good thing, right? You've come to realize your own eternality. You've come to realize the non-personal feature of God, but there's other features of God that you're not approaching. The Paramatma and ultimately the Bhagavan feature. These are eternal. And the love that one feels for that feature is not something that's meant to be renounced or let go of. That's the full evolution, the full perfection. So these are now, again, I mentioned there's something that people call Neo-Vedanta, which is kind of saying, no, both are perfect and you just choose the one that you want. But then both sides would say, well, if you're going to make that presentation, then you need to defend that presentation. You need to write the commentaries on Vedanta to defend that position. And those commentaries have never been written. And so I'm a Bhakti Vedantin. I'm following the Bhakti Vedantins. And the reason is this, right? And this is something that we've been talking about over the course of these nights. If you have a book and you have people that are giving different interpretations of the book, they have their reasons. You may have very intelligent people on both sides, and they're giving arguments for why they believe what they believe. They may come to a standstill. Yeah, stalemate. That's the word I was looking for. Thank you. What would be the perfect way to understand what the author of the book really meant? Can you suggest? I'm sorry? Well, but I have this experience and this other person has another experience. So what's the infallible way to understand what that author meant? You ask that author himself. If that author were to say, I see that you have this opinion about my work and I see that you have this another opinion, I'm going to reveal to you how to understand my work. Then that would solve the problem, would it not? Okay. Yes. But the author, so this is what happened. If you read the text, the Srimad Bhagavatam, right? The Srimad Bhagavatam is the text, early in this text, Vyasadeva, the author of the Vedic literature, the compiler of the Vedic literature, he reveals that after writing Vedas, Upanishads, Mahabharata and Bhagavad Gītā, and the Puranas, he was feeling some sense of incompleteness. He was trying to put his finger on why. His guru Narada explained to him, because you have not sufficiently explained Bhagavad Dharma. You've presented karma in such a way where people are going to think that that's the highest thing. You've explained jnana, but you've done it without fully expressing the beauty of Bhagavan. So even that is insufficient. And it's nashobha. It has no beauty in it. So then he very carefully, he understands, oh, people are going to be confused when they're reading my texts. They may think karma is the highest level. They may think jnana is the highest level without realizing the full evolution to bhakti. So then he writes the Srimad Bhagavatam, and he's very explicit in this text. Now the author himself is going to very explicitly lay this all out, and that text is undisputable. So if we were to make a mistake and say Shruti is the most important thing, everyone should just look to that, and these other books are less important. Well, that's not what Vyas says in his own text. Within the Upanishads itself, it says that the Puranas are the fifth Veda. They're just as reliable. And within the Puranas, and within the Bhagavatam itself, it's saying that this is the cream of all the Vedas. Right? It's saying that this is the mature fruit of Vyasadeva's work. It's saying that in this text, there will be no misdirection. Right? There'll be no false promises, like the false promise that karma will give you ultimate happiness or jnana will give you the ultimate happiness. You're not going to find any of that here. And you'll find many examples of people who have achieved the Brahman realization, like the four Kumaras. You can't find a better example of Brahman realized beings than the four Kumaras. But the four Kumaras in Bhagavatam are going to have a vision, a darshan of Vishnu, and then realize, oh, bhakti is still higher. And then they're going to explain that in great detail. So what the Bhakti Vedantins are arguing is Vyasadeva himself has answered the question. We just have to listen to the author. And when we listen to the author, we can put everything in place. We can understand how everything snaps into place. So you asked me why. Because I believe that the author answered the question himself. For many reasons, I believe it makes more sense. Okay? But beyond that, because the author himself has wrote in his own commentary on Vedanta, which is Srimad Bhagavatam. Okay. That's the reason. Thank you. We have time for maybe one more question, maybe two. Any last questions tonight? Yes, always. You got great questions.
Hey, thank you for that. I appreciated it. You're great at answering them. Say, I love to read, and I've just now finished reading the Gita for the first time. If you could, maybe make a short list of, read the. I was just, I was just introduced to. Maybe you've heard of the Veda base. That's cute. If you could maybe list off, like, after the Bhagavad Gita, this text is most important than this text, and it might be part of the Vedas, it might be part of Prabhupada's works that are, for sale at this event. But if you could maybe list a half a dozen or maybe 10, books to say, all right, go from here to here to here to here to here to gain the best, quickest understanding of the philosophy, I would certainly appreciate it.
Get your pen and paper out. I'd be happy to. So I would say Bhagavad Gita is first, and you've already approached that. There's a nice small book, which is from the Upanishads, called the Ishopanishad. Everything I'm going to give you, Prabhupada is translated. Maybe I'll come up with some others. So Ishopanishad, Srila Prabhupada's translation. I would say the first and second cantos of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Canto 1 and Canto 2. Of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And then I would say the book called Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, which is a summary of the 10th canto. That's also Prabhupada's. That right there is a real good chunk to get busy on. Then later, I would say there's a book called the Nectar of Devotion. Yes. And then there's a whole super large work to tackle called the Chaitanya Charitamrita. But you could read the philosophical essence of that in a book called The Teachings of Lord Chaitanya, also by Srila Prabhupada. There's another small book Prabhupada put out. Yeah.
So the teachings of Lord Chaitanya was based on that book again?
The Chaitanya Charitamrita. See, there's a biography of Sri Chaitanya called Chaitanya Charitamrita. And that book is not just a biography, but it also lays out a lot of the philosophical, theological teachings of this lineage. And that plays out in important conversations that Sri Chaitanya has with important people. There's about 5 or 6 very important conversations he has. The teachings of Lord Chaitanya presents those conversations. So without his whole life story, you get his important conversations. So that's a wonderful book. There's another small book called the Nectar of Instruction, which is his presentation of a book by Rupa Goswami called Shri Upadeshamrita. But Nectar of Instruction is all you need to know. That'll keep you busy for a while, I think. Yeah, thank you. Good books, worth reading. Okay. We can take one more question tonight. Any last one out here? Such a nice audience now. One last one? Yes.
Thank you. Can you put some emphasis on the difference between the Buddhist notion of an Ātman and the Ātman according to the Hindu scriptures? Like, what's like the main discourse, the main argument about that, and how can you resolve it somehow, if you can?
I'm not the person to ask about Buddhism, because my knowledge of Buddhism is very remedial, like that. But what little I understand, and I would hope I'd present this accurately, is that within Bhakti Vedānta, the conception is that we have our own eternal individual consciousness. Okay? In Advaita Vedānta, the idea is the individuality of our consciousness is an imposition. When that imposition is removed, you realize there's only one consciousness. And my understanding, and I may be wrong about Buddhism, but what I understand is that their nirvishesha is that actually your consciousness just becomes eliminated like that. So they're very different conceptions. I don't know if there's any resolution to be made. In other words, they're very different ideas about the nature of the self.
So can you say that there is someone who pulls the strings? Like in Buddhism, they say that there's not a real self, there's not real one that makes the actions, who has like these thoughts in his head. You know, no one really pulls the strings inside. So I'm curious to know, like according to Hinduism, who's doing that? Is it God? Is it Krishna? Is it the man himself? He has like these divine capabilities to create, to whatever he can do.
So if you say Hinduism, you got a million different ideas. So it's a question, right? It's a broad body of literature and people are interpreting in different ways. But through my studies and through learning in the lineage that I've studied, I can present that to you. And I believe there are very strong arguments to support this. There's a term Ishvara in Sanskrit, right? Ishvara, which means, like you're saying, pulling the strings, the controller. And we realize that there's many levels of Ishvaras. For instance, the Devas are Ishvaras. They're controlling aspects of nature. But we'll say that even those Devas, those are temporary positions to be played. They're almost like posts that someone plays. Someone plays that role for some time and then someone else steps into that Ishvara role. So they aren't the higher Ishvaras. And actually that there are unlimited universes. And in each one of those tiny little universes, there's different people playing those roles. There's a Lord Brahma in each one. There's not just one Brahma, but there's so many Brahmas. And there's not one Indra, there's so many Indras because there's so many universes. So from our universal perspective, we think, oh, the role of Brahma is like incredibly powerful. But only from this perspective. If we were to zoom out, we see there are unlimited Brahmas, right? So they're not the ultimate string puller, right? So they are called Ishvaras. Then you have the Maheshvara, right? The Maha Ishvara, the great Ishvara. And that's the name for, especially is given to Shiva, right? That Shiva is beyond all of those little universal controllers. He's something still beyond. But then there's the Paramishvara. Ishvara Parama, Krishna. This is the Vedic verse. Ishvara Parama Krishna. Satchit Ananda Vigraha. Anadir Adir Govinda Sarva Karana Karanam. Ishvara Parama Krishna, the ultimate, the Parama, the highest, the supreme Ishvara or controller is Sri Krishna. Satchit Ananda Vigraha. His Vigraha, his form is eternal, full of knowledge and bliss. Anadir Adir Govinda. He is the beginning of, he's beyond all beginnings. Sarva Karana Karanam. He is the cause of all causes. Right? So this is a very clear verse identifying the supreme. Right? Now the idea of Krishna as the supreme may be very different than what we might conceive. Because Krishna does not personally get involved in creation. Krishna does not personally get involved in destruction. Krishna does not purposely get involved in the maintenance in between the two. Krishna doesn't get involved in judging, right? All the things that we think of the big Ishvara, the big God doing, Krishna doesn't take interest in any of that. He outsources it all to lower level Ishvaras. What's Krishna doing? All he's doing, his only interest is in divine love. He's engaged in Leela. He's engaged in play. All of the work of string pulling, he outsources, and he just absorbs himself in adventures of love, wherein people are pulling the strings of his heart, actually. He's getting strings pulled on him, because in that position of divine love, he even becomes vulnerable to that. So the Supreme Ishvara can be tied up by his mother in the form of her love. He can be controlled by his lover in the form of Radha due to the power of her love. Right? The Supreme Ishvara is crawling on the ground in his courtyard of his loving father, carrying his father's shoes for him, like this. This is the ultimate controller. Buddhism's not going to teach you this. Advaita Vedānta is not going to teach you this. You're only going to find this in texts like Srimad Bhagavatam. Thank you all so very much. It's been a joy spending this evening with you. We'll be here again tomorrow. Yogi True tomorrow morning. Tomorrow morning, please, if you want to have the most wonderful asana meditation class, the great Yogi True will be teaching at 8 a.m. in the hall here. I will be teaching more on Vedanta at 9, from 9 till 10. And we'll be here every night. We got, I think, 7 more nights now. It's maybe 6 more nights now. 6 more nights. Coming down, okay? But still, if we had a whole week of a festival and it was just starting, we would say, we got a whole week. So this festival is just so long that a week seems like a short time. But actually, we got a week of festival left, people. So there's still a lot to come. Please join us in the mornings. Please join the Kirtan more tonight, Prasadam tonight, and I'll see you again tomorrow. If you'd like to get recordings of all of these talks and all that's going on, please connect with Gabriella here and she can hook you up with that. Thank you so much. Hari Om Tat Sat.